Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome affects 1 in 10 women. The most common factor between all the people who suffer from PCOS is they have insulin resistance. I see in my nutritional practice teenagers, people in their early 20s, early 30s being diagnosed with pre-diabetes. The good news is pre-diabetes and PCOS are both reversible with dietary and lifestyle changes. Know that you have agency. You can massively influence the outcome based on all the things that you are doing on a daily basis. Hello, welcome back to the Eat, Burn, Sleep podcast. Today, we are talking about Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome or Polycystic Ovary Syndrome, PCOS, that affects 1 in 10 women around the world. Some stats even show that it affects around 15% of women. And here is the big news. You do not need to have cysts on your ovaries to have PCOS. PCOS is triggered by the environment, by the lifestyle, and by genetics. And when I was in nutrition school, I wrote a paper about PCOS. And what was amazing, the good news is, there is so much research. You can look it up. There are dozens of studies showing that the first line of action, i.e. the most effective thing to do for people with PCOS, is to change their lifestyle and their diet. So the good news is you can absolutely do something about it. What does PCOS mean? If it doesn't mean that you necessarily have cysts on your ovaries, how does PCOS express itself? So the most common factor between all the people who suffer from PCOS is they have insulin resistance. So having insulin resistance and PCOS can be expressed through the body via different symptoms. The first one is people tend to gain weight. Not always, but they tend to gain weight. So there is weight gain. The second thing is infertility. It can lead to issues with conceiving. But again, not necessarily, because all the symptoms of PCOS are not present every time someone is diagnosed with PCOS, and that's why it's a little hard to diagnose. There can be some hair loss on the head, but excess body hair, and also really low mood. So blood sugar dysregulation will be linked to energy fluctuations and also to having lower mood. It is quite hard to diagnose PCOS because it is not necessarily by looking at the ovaries. Some women are diagnosed with PCOS and it can be expressed through having insulin resistance. So the diabetes markers are slightly elevated, can be even pre-diabetic. They can have excess body hair, weight gain, low mood, infertility, but they don't necessarily have cysts on their ovaries. So what is insulin resistance? Insulin resistance is when the body becomes insensitive to insulin that is secreted by the pancreas to lower blood sugar levels. For example, after eating a meal, your blood sugar levels will elevate naturally. Hence, the pancreas will produce insulin to bring them back into homeostasis, into a normal range. People with insulin resistance will be less sensitive to insulin, and that means that blood sugar levels will be elevated for a longer time, leading to hormonal issues and to hormone dysfunction. That can so, of course, lead to weight gain. Having insulin sensitivity is absolutely critical for the health of your cells, and insulin resistance can lead to the formation of AGEs, which are advanced glycation end products when sugars stick to the protein in the blood. AGEs are highly destructive. They are linked to damaging the cells. They are linked to oxidation and to chronic inflammation. When the protein and the sugar stick in the blood, that leads to aging. I see in my nutritional practice so many people suffering from PCOS and pre-diabetes. And what is happening is actually truly worrying. In the olden days, 50 years ago, people with pre-diabetes were generally people in their 50s. Now I see teenagers, people in their early 20s, early 30s being diagnosed with pre-diabetes. The good news is pre-diabetes and PCOS are both reversible with dietary and lifestyle changes. I have worked with many women suffering from Polycystic Ovarian Syndrome, and I have even worked with endocrinologists. And what we find, the evidence shows that when you control your diet, you also have a better effect of the medication. So I have a lovely endocrinologist who wrote a testimonial saying that when her patients follow the eat, burn, sleep lifestyle, following the PCOS, diabetes, and prediabetes advice, they get better results taking drugs like metformin. Oftentimes, I get people who send me messages on social media or drop me an email, and they tell me that they have been diagnosed, let's say, with diabetes or PCOS or, in fact, another condition. And they ask me, the doctor gave me this medication. Shall I take the medication or shall I follow the eat, burn, sleep plan? My answer is always that one should use all the crutches that they have access to until they can walk without them. If your doctor is giving you medication and you are reducing chronic inflammation, taking control of your blood sugar levels through dietary changes, through lifestyle changes, the medication will work better because you're helping put your immune system into homeostasis, which will then allow the medical treatment to have a greater effect. With many conditions, when people are so inflamed that can develop medication resistance, that has happened to me with inflammatory bowel disease, where I was so inflamed that actually medication didn't work anymore. It's because my immune system was so dysregulated that it was harder to bring it back into a state of homeostasis, meaning being within a healthy range, being balanced. So what are the big no-nos for someone with PCOS? The first thing is no intermittent fasting. In my experience, in my clinical practice, what are the big no-nos for people with PCOS? Insulin resistance and diabetes. The first thing, from an evidence standpoint, is to completely avoid long periods of fasting, but also to avoid constant grazing. Why? A long fasting period, and I'm talking about 14 hours, 15 hours, 16 hours and more, can trigger a cortisol response. So when we fast, we produce two hormones. We produce human growth hormone, which is a hormone that helps burn fat, and also the hormone of youth, that of regeneration of cells, and that's the positive side of fasting. But the flip side of the coin is that when we fast, we also produce cortisol because ancestrally we had to go and hunt for food. As a result, for people with diabetes, PCOS, prediabetes, on the Eat, Burn, Sleep platform, I have a plan dedicated to them, and I strongly advise to not go for very long fasting periods. I also set a meal plan that aims at reducing chronic inflammation, at regulating cortisol response, at regulating blood sugar levels, and at bringing the body into a state where blood sugar levels are stabilized. And that is linked to diet as well as cortisol. What are the things that can really trigger your cortisol levels? The way you think, the amount of hours that you sleep, and this is linked to diet, and the way you exercise. So for someone with PCOS, I strongly advise to not do inflammatory, high-intensity, high-impact workouts. We've helped thousands of people on the Eat, Burn, Sleep platform. We've had over 15,000 members so far, and so many positive testimonials from people who suffer from several conditions, including PCOS, insulin resistance, and so on. And the way I have helped them is not by doing anything extreme. A study conducted as early as 2015 has shown that overweight women with PCOS get positive beneficial health results following an anti-inflammatory, low glycemic index diet. Hyperinsulinemia is when your insulin levels are elevated. That triggers the sympathetic nervous system, which then leads to higher cortisol levels and further blood sugar dysregulation. So women with PCOS can be stuck in a vicious cycle of having higher blood sugar levels, which then lead to higher cortisol level, which then lead to further blood sugar dysregulation. High blood sugar levels can lead to chronic inflammation, which in turn can lead to higher cortisol levels, adrenal dysfunction, blood sugar elevation, and further chronic inflammation. As a result, some women can be in this vicious cycle, but the very good news is there are so many studies showing that the first line of treatment for women with PCOS is dietary and lifestyle changes. So I'm going to give you a few examples of people that I have helped with PCOS. I once had a young woman who came to me. Her food was very controlled. She was working out with her personal trainer, yet her PCOS symptoms were still there. She was feeling tired. She had low mood. She couldn't lose weight. She had excess hair on the body, and her hormones were completely out of sync. What we started doing, the first thing that I implemented was to reduce her workouts and to change her diet to what I share on the PCOS protocol on the platform. The reason why I stopped the exercise at the beginning, I only allowed her to walk and to do gentle yoga, was to just bring those cortisol levels down. Changing her diet was already a little bit of a shock to the body because although she thought she was being healthy, she was not really doing the right thing. So what I implemented was something new, and anything new can be a little bit of a shock to the body and can lead to cortisol elevation. As a result, when I change someone's way of eating, I like at the beginning to do very little exercise until the body gets used to it. And that's why on the Eat, Burn, Sleep platform, if you remember, you know that on the first week, I say that you should do no exercise and only walk. It's effectively the opposite of shocking the body. A lot of people in the health industry love this thing of we're going to shock the body. In fact, any form of shock can be perceived by the body as an inflammatory trigger. So you want to de-shock the body and you want to calm the system down. Once she adapted to that way of eating, she immediately saw some weight loss. That weight loss, that immediate 1 or 2 kilos, generally is water loss. The reason for that is when there is chronic inflammation, water leaks from the arteries to the system and the lymphatic drainage can be slightly impaired, leading to water retention all over the body. A typical example to know if you have water retention is your rings. If you're able to take your rings off today, but tomorrow they're a bit stuck, it means that whatever you ate or the lack of sleep you had or the workout you did inflamed you. So we put her on the PCOS protocol that I share with you on the platform. And then by week 2, I started slowly bringing back movement. And they were typically the movement videos that I share on the platform, starting with the beginner ones. I also implemented certain supplements to help with blood sugar regulation. And it is important to know that several strands of bacteria in the gut are linked to blood sugar levels. So we know today, and we've known this actually for around 15 years now, that gut bacteria is linked to blood sugar dysregulation, and that the presence or absence of certain strains of bacteria will dictate if your body is better at regulating blood sugar or not. So the Eat, Burn, Sleep lifestyle is aimed at not only regulating blood sugars with what you're eating, but also at fixing your gut bacteria. That is why if you look at things only from one standpoint, so for example, there's this very famous influencer called the Glucose Goddess who focuses on blood sugars solely. And sometimes the solutions she gives are actually not very good for gut health, but we know that gut health is really linked to blood sugar regulation. So you have to look at the problem from all angles. And what are the different things that help regulate your blood sugar levels? The food you eat, is it spiking your blood sugar levels or not? The food you eat, the timing of the food in terms of how is it affecting your gut bacteria? Are you developing the right bacteria to regulate your blood sugars in the medium and long term? How are you sleeping? It has been shown that having 8 hours of sleep versus 7 hours of sleep will have a different outcome when it comes to blood sugar levels. So it has been shown that with the exact same foods, with 8 hours of sleep versus 7 hours, eating the same exact food will elevate your blood sugars less when you're sleeping 8 hours versus 7 hours a night. So you have to take sleep into account. Then, how are you exercising? If you are doing workouts that are really triggering a cortisol response, your blood sugar levels will be more elevated eating the same foods than if you're doing workouts that are not triggering a cortisol response. And finally, what are you making of stress events in your head? So stress is a very subjective thing, and part of your work as somebody who's trying to improve your blood sugar levels is to try and breathe and keep your cool as much as possible. And there are exercises where you can physiologically, through breath, help regulate your cortisol levels, which will then regulate your chronic inflammation and blood sugar levels. So all in all, if you are suffering from PCOS or pre-diabetes or insulin resistance or diabetes, know that you have agency. You can massively influence the outcome based on all the things that you are doing on a daily basis. And I invite you to follow the Eat, Burn, Sleep 6-week reset, incorporating the advice in the PCOS, insulin resistance, and diabetes advice. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. Make sure to share it with anyone who suffers from PCOS, insulin resistance, prediabetes, or diabetes. Thank you so much to all of you for listening to this podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. It's always such a pleasure to talk about health because it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Looking after our health is a daily thing, just like brushing our teeth. We've got to focus on it, we've got to do it right so we can live better and happier lives. For those of you who are not members of the platform yet, we have a discount code for all our podcast listeners. You can get 15% off the memberships. Just enter the code podcast15 at checkout. And make sure to read all the articles and all the free content we have on eatburnsleep.com to keep you motivated and informed and educated about living an anti-inflammatory lifestyle.